mean, we just raised our $2 million round. Fundraising is like scraping your head against concrete. Like it's so hard. You have to be so proactive. There are 500 million diabetic people. Out of those 500 million diabetic people in the world, maybe about a quarter of them will have a wound in their lifetime that they're not going to be able to heal. You know, I watched an episode of The Flash about them, and I thought, wow, like in this episode, there was a villain that could like multiply himself, so he could duplicate himself. And I thought it was super cool that, you know, there's these cells that are like, it's like an open canvas, right? That you can kind of turn into portions of your body.
Welcome back. Today, we're talking to a founder that started his journey into stem cells at the age of 12. While most kids were watching anime, he was looking into biology already through a different lens.
We are sitting down with Franco Kraiselburd. He is the CEO of Asclepi. He grew up in 5 different countries, and you'd think that would inspire him to start his company, but that's not the case. What inspired him was an episode of the show Flash.
What he realized is that while we have advanced therapies, basic wound care has not advanced at all. He's tackling the massive problem of chronic wounds, especially in emerging markets. His goal is essentially to create the next band-aid.
And the twist of the whole story is this guy is building a deep tech company in Ohio. And when I asked him about it, we're like, why Ohio? He actually had a really good answer as to why he thinks Ohio is the future.
We also get into his secret superpower for networking, how finding just one key connector opened doors to major clients that he never could have gotten on his own.
This podcast is a great look at building a deep tech company, but also Franco gives us a really interesting insight. He talks about the power of personal branding and how personal branding even matters in the deep tech industry. So without further ado, let's dive in. So Franco, first of all, your LinkedIn, it says that you got into stem cells at the age of 12, which I think is absolutely insane, right? So I would love for you to start the podcast with that. How did you get into stem cells at the age of 12?
Yeah, no, both my parents were in the business. So, that I mean, they didn't really have any stem cell background, to begin with. So, I grew up around the world, in 5 countries and 7 cities. And growing up around the world, you kind of, you know, you struggle to fit into the places that you live in sometimes because you're always considered an outsider. So I had recently moved to Brazil, which is where I spent the most of my life. And I was in this school that, you know, people spoke Portuguese in. And I didn't really speak um a lick of Portuguese. So I wasn't doing very well in school. I obviously had a lot to be desired when it came to, like, you know, the language classes. And in biology, you know, my professor, my teacher is like, you know, why don't we try something different? So, in short, they put me into this program where instead of kind of doing, I mean, you still did do exams and things like that, but what the real focus was, how can we make you think outside of the box? How can we have you, for example, read the scientific method and come up with um a method, like a question, like a scientific hypothesis, right? And that's how it started. So I actually I just started, like, I had a mentor who was teaching me. She had a master's degree in this really kind of weird concept I had never heard of before, which is stem cells. And basically, you know, I watched an episode of The Flash about them, and I thought, wow, like, you know, in this episode, there was a villain that could like multiply himself, so he could duplicate himself, and the lore was that he had like a really advanced stem cell. And I thought it was super cool that, you know, there's these cells that are like, it's like an open canvas, right? That you can kind of turn into um portions of your body. I mean, I thought of, you know, these animals, right? Like, I mean, like lizards, or you know, that could like that could grow back a finger or a tail or something after it had been cut. And to me, I thought of the human being like that, and that thought was fascinating to me. So I started, you know, getting into it. That's how I eventually got a job. I came up with a few ideas. Eventually got a job washing beakers at a cell therapy lab. And it's funny because at that lab, so it was a lab that was in front of a hospital. So at that lab, we'd often, you know, kind of create solutions that would be treated with patients, right? And, you'd often take the bus and you'd sit next to a lot of the patients that would then be treated at the hospital. And you could tell that they were a patient because they either had a boot, right? Like a, a lot of these people had like chronic wounds or like eye problems, right? Like vision problems. So you could definitely tell them by like a special kind of sunglass, like glasses or a boot. And they always felt like they were the patient of the month, right? Because out of hundreds of thousands of patients, they were so excited that they were the only one who was going to be able to receive an advanced treatment that month. And, that was really exciting, it was contagious until we also realized that, there's this dark undertone to it, which is that there's just hundreds of thousands of patients that are never gonna receive a treatment, like an advanced treatment to restore their vision or to heal their wounds that they can't heal and that they could die from, and so, that was really when that's how, I kept on that's really what kept me going, right, throughout, like, 12 through, 23 now, it was just that, so.
So it sounds like you want to democratize this. It's not that one lucky lottery winner, gets the treatment. You want this to be accessible to everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because think about it, like, there are 500 million diabetic people, all right? Out of those 500 million diabetic people in the world, maybe about a quarter of them will have a wound in their lifetime that they're not gonna be able to heal. Like, it's gonna they're gonna get paper cut or they're gonna cut themselves while cooking, I don't know, right? And that wound, if it's not treated, it's gonna get infected. Those wounds are really, really, really expensive. So the mean cost per wound in America is just $4,000. And that's actually in the world, more or less. If you think about the world, like we don't have it much better. It's always around that. But if a wound gets infected, it's like $30,000. Now, most of America can't pay for $4,000 for a wound. Imagine the $30,000 figure. And what if I told you that 75% of these wounds and these diabetics are actually in emerging countries like in Brazil or in India? Most of these people are in places that don't have access to a doctor every week or every month, and it's just so hard because that's when the wounds, these conditions get so much more accentuated. And so um the way I think of it is when you don't have access to much, right? When you don't have access to like a consistent hospital or you don't have access to um like clinical care like a nurse, right, or a doctor, you rely on the simplest thing next to you, and that is usually, especially when it comes to wounds, like I'm passionate about wounds, obviously, it's bandages and it's ointments, right? You rely on the bandage and the gel and like the ointment. So I figured why hasn't anyone in 2 decades done the next Band-Aid, right? Like why hasn't there been a next Band-Aid? And so that's really what I'm focused on essentially. It's kind of creating a almost like a new generation of the band.
So you managed to raise $3 million right out of college. That's a huge feat. How did you craft that pitch and get investors on board so early?
Yeah, well, it started with, there's a lot that goes like, I think, the most amount of the money I raised was within the last year, which means that I had already had a lot of this business model set up. So the first thing I have to do is, I mean, you have to understand your problem and you have to understand what you're trying to solve and how you're trying to solve it almost better than anyone else. So if actually you have to find a way to be the best in the world at something really in order to have people give you money ultimately. And so what I decided I wanted to be the best in the world at was understanding the complex landscape of like what is healthcare specifically in the wound care setting. How are wounds healed? What are the economics? What are the regulations? Like, what are the laws around it? Um, and what's the day to day of a person who heals wounds for a living like? And what are their headaches? So I spent a lot of time. I did over 150 customer interviews. The first money I got was actually funded by the U.S. National Science Foundation to just go out of the building and ask people. Like I would literally drive or fly to different clinics and I would spend the day with them and I would ask them, "Hey, what are your problems?" Like my entire goal here is to understand what is not working, right? And you can tell things aren't working because you look at the statistics, right? I mean, there's still people clearly dying or facing financial ruin from these ones. So it's clearly not perfect. And so once that happened, we are obviously scientists, so we created let's call it an MVP, right? Like a concept, a minimum viable product, a concept that had initial good data, it worked okay, it could solve the problem. And that's when we had our first set of money. So our first million was actually purely this is the hardest one. It's equivalent to scraping your face against concrete constantly. But it was a grant. So we literally just got non-dilutive funding after non-dilutive funding. And it's not just US. We went all over the world. So we got a grant from Mexico. We got a grant from small grant, but I'm pretty sure we got a grant from Spain, and then we got, we did get a lot of US like accelerators and things like that. So I think 800K was kind of grants, and then 200K was accelerator. And then, yeah, after that, after $1 million, a good level of data, a good story to tell, because that story is really important. That's really when we finally got into going to venture capital. Um, And so, yeah, when we just raised our $2 million round, I mean, again, it's fundraising is like scraping your head against concrete. Like it's so hard, and you have to be so proactive. But we found a good set of investors that we liked after a lot of work, and we're happy where we're at.
You mentioned you could conducted like hundreds of interviews to just learn about the market. So I'm curious, what were your thoughts and assumptions going in originally versus what are the things that you figured out and learned from people after talking to them?
Yeah. So I was actually wildly wrong when I first started my interviews. So my first assumption was it's funny, I remember it was that there is a lack of what I'm gonna call advanced wound care. And so, I thought like bandages, all that, like they were solving the needs, everything was good. And what really was happening is that after the band-aid stage, or like the dressings, like from a nurse, you have to get into like a cell therapy or like something really advanced, really crazy. And I thought that was where the lack was. I thought they were really expensive. I thought they could only be applied in really like specific locations. And while they still are expensive, and they are restricted, and like you can't do a cell therapy in a nursing home, right? But I was actually wrong. It turns out that the biggest headache that everyone had, and it'll actually make sense, right, is that the second that a wound happens, you can't use anything other than a Band-Aid or a dressing. Even though that's the most critical moment of care, you can't use anything other than a bandage or a dressing. And what happens there is that when I mean the critical moment of care is like the second you have a wound is the most important portion. Like if you can treat it immediately, like you're gonna reduce scarring almost entirely, right? And so all of a sudden, it's almost like but it's almost like the doctors themselves didn't think of the fact that there could be a better bandage or a better dressing. So it's not like they go to you and they're like, "Well, hey, I kind of need a better product for this." They didn't say that. They were like, "Well, because they'll every doctor used to tell me to go make like a new advanced like cell therapy or something. I remember that early on, and so I was like, well, but you're telling me to make a cell therapy, but all of you guys are telling me that your problems really are that by the time the wound gets to you, it's already really messed up, and if people could treat it easier and cheaper and faster sooner. So anyway, my biggest hypothesis was that I would have to create something that is like very advanced, and more importantly than advanced, like that was like the next cell therapy of the world, like a crazy thing. And turns out like no, it was the real needs were super simple, super clear, and super back to basics. And it's like a better band-aid. Like how much simpler than that can it get? Um well, it was complicated to find out how to solve that, right? Because one thing is listening to your customers, then is it's trying to create a solution that has like product market fit. And if you ask me, like you have to be the best in the world at something. We became the best in the world at product market fit. Like genuinely. I don't think there's a single company in my space that understands the complex landscape and has introduced a product that fits the market so well in the last 2 decades than my company right now. And that's why, we're investable.
Okay, I have to ask you about the location, the where a company is based. It's based in Ohio, right? It's a place that most people are trying to leave, but you actually went there, and from your LinkedIn post, it looks like you think that's the future, right? So if you get into why you're so bullish on Ohio, that'd be awesome.
Right. Yeah, and it's crazy because I've lived in Brazil, I've lived in Argentina, I've spent some time in Chile, in Spain, and I mean, all to be fair, I've never gone to the eastern side of the world, but like, it is ironic that like, you know, of all places you think, why is this guy so bullish on Ohio? But Ohio is a really unique place, and it's uniquely qualified to build better than honestly any place I've seen before. I mean, I've had the chance to go to New York or San Francisco or these other places, and e- especially for what I'm doing, like think like the Cleveland Clinic, which I'm sure you've heard of, is here, right? Like, and um, there is no place with more infrastructure and support for entrepreneurs, as well as low cost and a lot of low cost, by the way. Like I spend maybe a third in rent than my colleagues in New York and San Francisco do. And you're right. Like I'm going to tell you, part of the reason that fundraising for me was so hard is because fundraising in Ohio is difficult, especially early stage. You do get a lot of later stage funding. So like once you hit Series A, Series B, there are funds who will take you. But um, there was just I needed to be in the best place in the world, actually, and that didn't exactly exist. Um, but I saw traces of like I'm gonna call it a utopia. I saw traces of a place that I truly felt could be the best in the world for this, and I decided I wanted to build it. And so Ohio's given me a lot of trust in their and like as an outsider and coming in and trying to build in their ecosystem. And honestly, it's been 5 years now, and we are building. I mean, there's two kinds of people. There's the people who join an ecosystem and there's the people who build it. And I think that there's an asymmetric upside, a genuinely like never before seen or like reward for someone who's been able to build it. And I think Ohio needed people like me, still does. And it's, people who believe in science and who are doing deep tech, but who also can leverage these difficult networks that are hard to break into. But once you're there, like they'll support you. And that's what I'm here to do is, I mean, I'm bullish on Ohio. I think it is actually my burn rate is a lot lower. My access to infrastructure, like think about it. Think about Harvard for a second and think about how many students walk through Harvard's hallways every single day and ask for a lab. Oh, can I have access to your equipment to do this? No, I'm a professor at Harvard. Why am I going to give this random kid, right, access to my $300,000 piece of equipment? That's not going to happen. Great. That kid is never going to start a company, at least with that, using that equipment or whatever, right? I'm here in Cleveland. I worked my butt off working for labs, but guess what? I asked the guys in my lab, hey, could I like use your lab? Just like, yeah, go ahead, knock yourself out, whatever. They're hungry for it, right? And here's the thing, to the point where I actually now have this small little room in one of my old boss's labs where they just gave it to me. They're like, you know what? You can use it. Knock yourself out, kid. What's the worst you're gonna do? I know you're not gonna break anything, but if you do, anyway. But so ultimately, that's why I like Ohio.
Wow. Okay, okay. But is it hard to get talent to move to Ohio though? Like, are people willing to leave everything behind in a place where there's a really solid ecosystem and then move to Ohio, which whose ecosystem is still pretty nascent?
I've never had a problem with it personally. Like never. If I had, but I will say we haven't gotten to the point where we're seeking out like talent out externally. So like what we're doing, it's funny. There was a big grant. So it was like a $50 million grant here at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland that they were tasked with doing, making completely, like, artificial, like, knees from scratch. So, like, imagine being able to grab a little bit of you, like, of Ashley, and make a whole another knee for you, right? So, like, as you're getting older, you could, like, rejuvenate entirely, right? Like, your cartilage and your joints and, obviously, that has a lot of things for arthritis, but also, like, high performance athletes. In short, anyway, so those guys actually did a lot of the hiring for us. They brought in all this foreign talent, a lot of brilliant people from all over the world. And it was beautiful because there was Iranians, there was Indians, there was, um, people from South America. I mean, it was like truly world class talent, and they brought him here. And then, the grant was a great talent fountain for us, right? And as I mentioned, right, remember, like, and it's funny because I bet on this ecosystem before that even happened, and all of a sudden, right, like this happens, and now we're getting all this ton of talent coming in. So again, yeah, we didn't have much of a problem. I'm not gonna say that it's not gonna be like I think it'll be a problem for the next like 2 years. I mean, but for now, we haven't had it.
Franco, I've noticed you have a really active personal brand, right? Which I don't think is that common in the deep tech space, right? I've interviewed a few people in that space. I don't think it's that common. So I wanted to ask was that intentional, and does a strong personal brand help in the deep tech space?
Yeah. Um, it started when I was like, I wasn't even I didn't even think about starting a company or anything of it, but I started because I kept on meeting these scientists who were doing amazing work, like world-changing work. Like, think about restoring the movement of someone with paralysis all the way through to, like, making artificial blood so that you don't have to worry about donating or like, all the things that come with it. And I had never heard of them. I never like, they're in my backyard, they're in my city. In fact, they were, like, a building away from where I worked, and I went to every event, and I tried meeting people, and it's almost like I felt like networking, if you just keep it to the personal level, it's always gonna be limited. You're always gonna have a problem, um, and you're always gonna hit a wall, right, and a ceiling if you're just, like, networking with the people in your building, networking with your people in your city, or even in your state. And then on the other hand, I had obviously a lot of people that I grew up all over the world, so I had people that I wanted to keep up with. So I always kept, up with my brand as a way to kinda keep in touch with people that I liked around my life, right, that I remember, or that "Hey, you're out in Spain, but look at what I'm doing here in Cleveland." And then I made it to my first few news articles, and it was, like, again, really hard. It was really just, like, because we were doing something really crazy, and that was when something really unique happened, and that's when I learned about the power of your personal brand. Uh, and it was that we had a potential customer come to us and be like, "Hey, we saw you in this article, you know, we kind of we're in the same space, like I do wound care. I'm in Cleveland. I'd love to meet you and see what you're up to and see how I can help." I mean, this guy was one of the biggest wound care companies in Ohio, and I'm all of a sudden shocked. Oh wow! Like, and his impression of us was so positive. He was like, I love what you're doing. I think it's awesome, and I had never told him much about it other than what he read in the news. And so I realized that if I wanted to scale what I do as a CEO, but like at a completely new level, I needed to build a personal brand, and I needed to keep up with that personal brand because it's almost like shaving every morning, right? It's like you do something to take care of your appearance, right? Or you're cutting your hair. Like, why do we do this personal brand in real life, but we don't really do it right, like digitally? A lot of people don't, and that's where I think we should, like, it's a mistake not to. So yeah, I've gotten investment dollars from it. I've gotten customers from it. I've gotten corporate partnerships and strategics from it. So all in all,
You just held the Poseidon launch event, and you had people flying over from all over. How do you like generate that kind of attention and get people to come through?
and by the way, it's funny. We we have people flying in from like Panama and Costa Rica to see this. And I told these guys, I'm like, the product's not even like approved there. Like you can't sell it there. And they're like, no, it's okay. We don't care. Like we're gonna figure it out, and because we believe. Um, so I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm gonna give you the best answer I can, and that answer is this has been years in the making, and it's been years of keeping consistent and keeping up with my network. I mean, I've pissed a lot of people off, but I've never stopped doing what I'm doing. So here's a really good tip. So people come, people go, and ultimately the ones that you remember are the ones that either gave you something to remember or never gave you something to forget. And so you're like, what does that mean? What I mean by that is that, well, never giving someone something to forget is if I'm the band-aid guy, I'm always the band-aid guy. And like unless something major happens, I exit or whatever, I'm always doing the same thing. And so you hear me 6 months before, I'm telling you, hey, I'm building the next Band-Aid. Okay, cool. 6 months after, I'm still doing the next Band-Aid. Like, oh, cool. What's happened now? Well, now I raised the VC round. Okay, cool. Awesome. That's really cool. You know what I mean? And so that consistency and that level of um being obviously you have to be very like I mean I'm not here being cocky about it. I'm not like, oh, I'm the best. Like, no, I am being objective. I'm being clear. Like, I want to solve this problem, and I'm going to stop at nothing and doing it stubbornly. And yeah, I mean, so I think that's a portion of it. People gravitate towards that level of consistency because often we don't see entrepreneurs with that level of grit anymore. With just like this s- like face scraping consistency that like you're not going to stop at anything. And I think that's probably the biggest driver and then another thing I'm going to add to is we have wonderful partners with like actual customers and partnerships with customers, with partnerships with universities, partnerships with hospitals. And we've built a network of partners, especially locally. Remember, part of ecosystem building is a huge deal, but also just like internationally of people who believe in what we're doing and who want us to succeed almost as much as they want themselves to succeed, as everyone wants to succeed. And they want us to succeed because they believe in the world that we're trying to build. And so that's, I think, when we started all this, it's just again, it's consistency, it's building partnerships, and the last thing I think I want to mention to you, which I think is really important. I learned this from a really good friend of mine, who's exited, is a founder who's exited several times, and that is great is the enemy of good. You ever heard that saying? If you're always trying to be great, or if you're always trying to be perfect, then and you don't allow yourself to just be okay or just be good sometimes, like you're never gonna achieve greatness, right? So I'm not saying settle for great. I'm not saying, oh, this is good. That's it. I'm done. Right? Like give it your all, and we did with this event. But like we were gonna launch whether we had 5 people show up or whether we had 160. And it's better to have 160, but like we're not gonna change what we're doing just because there's 5 people looking at us, right? Um, uh, as far as I know, if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, it apparently didn't fell, right? It didn't fall or something. But I'm looking. That's my tree right there. And even if there's no one else looking at it, I'm the one who's looking at my tree falling.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk about Asclepi. Asclepi, right? So it's a very interesting, unique name. So what went into starting a company with a name like that? And do you think the difficulty in pronunciation is benefiting your company anyway, or is it hurting it?
So Asclepius is the Greek god of medicine. He's known as the healer of all wounds. So have you ever seen the snake with the rod, you know? Like, yeah, yeah. So that's the Asclepius rod. And I just thought it felt really singular. And so I wanted to make it almost like a wordplay, like a plural, like Eskeleppy, right, is like several healers of all wounds. So we're making a bunch of little healers of all wounds. But I came up with the name when I was 14. So that was like when I first started this project, this hypothesis, this episode of The Flash, right? That's where I was like, well, what am I going to name this project? And I named it Project Asclepius. And Asclepius is actually, believe it or not, pretty that it's in itself was pretty hard to trademark, but Ascleppy just had a different ring to it. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, is it the most search engine optimizable name? Probably not. Is it the most marketable name? Probably not. But it just it is a reminder because it's hard it's hard sometimes to keep doing this, and I have to remind myself like, hey, you've been doing this since you were 13, and if you don't keep going, no one will. And so Asclepi is a reminder every day of where this all started and where we came from. So that's why we keep it.
So who are your clients right now? I assume this is not a direct to consumer play, right? Are you selling to like hospitals or like organizations?
So our main audience is a B2B. You're right. We service nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities and several we call like outpatients, like several hospital areas that like treat wounds. So if you think about anyone who treats like wounds, so anyone from like, oh, I had an injury, right, that I need like surgery for, all the way through I'm old and I have a bed sore, right? All the way through like, hey, I have a chronic condition like a diabetes or something, and that's why I get wounds that I can't heal on my own, right? So we treat any wound that goes into a hospital or a clinical setting. Um, it's a lot. It's a huge market, especially globally. So, but right now we're focused on the U.S. We are expanding to Mexico and Spain, which is cool. But it's funny. We actually recently started opening up. So our products are approved for like anyone. Anyone you could go. I mean, not. I guess we're not approved in India yet. Hopefully soon, but you could go and buy in the U.S. like our over the counter version. So we are opening up towards a more, let's call it like a B2C audience, so like a direct to consumer audience. We're killing it with the nurses. Like the nurses love what like they love it because again, it's not just about the good. It's a great product, but it's also a great pricing that we're figuring out for them, and it's an immediate response. Like within 8 days, 96% of patients had a complete resolution of all of the things that were stopping their wound. So like they had the wound be perfectly prepped to then move on to the next stage, and that's huge. 8 days is really quickly. So yeah, so right now it's mainly nurses. Nurses are our biggest consumer, maybe a little bit of doctors, and then uh their distributors, so like the people who sell the nurses and the people who sell the doctors, and then yeah, B2B, a B2C audience is opening up for us as well.
I'd love to hear your story about the very first client. How did you get the first organization to trust you and actually buy the product?
I'm gonna open up the hood little bit. I'm gonna tell you a secret superpower that I accidentally came upon that changed my life and changed my business forever. Um, and that is that at some point in doing these interviews, we had a lot of big, really famous doctors be interested in what we were doing, and that was great. But what I didn't know was happening was that at the same time, by doing these customer interviews and asking people about their problems, I was um I was building a network that was in my space of people who knew it's a very small space. Like there's most spaces like, especially niche like this are really like it's a small world and eventually, you knock on enough doors that the doors start knocking back. It's like, "Oh yeah, but we spoke to this guy, that guy spoke to that guy, those guys spoke to each other." And eventually it came upon me that one of the people who in my network, right, as I was building these interviews, so it was like I'm gonna say it was a connection of a connection. I saw on LinkedIn that she was the vice president of like one of the biggest companies in wound care and like in medicine. she was a vice president of like clinical affairs and like sales, basically. So like for a clinical person, like nurses, that's just sales ultimately. And she had just like quit. And so I'm like, I can't afford this person. Like, there's no chance in hell that I'm going to be able to pay for their salary. But like, I need to go talk to them because if they might be able to at least give me some hours of their time. So I go talk to this person who again, it was like basically like a technical sales director, but like their job was to know people in my area, in my field, right? In like wound care and to build a long lasting relationship with them. So I talked to them and long story short, they ended up investing in my company and they ended up being one of my biggest superpowers because guess what? She would pick up the phone, Ashley. It's like I remember the first time she ever did this, it was like I didn't think these people existed. Like she picks up the phone, so yeah, I have this product. I really want you to try it. And this customer is like, let's just call it a really like prestigious, influential, big company in the space that like it would have been your ideal customer. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know. You're in the music industry, and this guy picks up the phone, and it's like Warner all of a sudden, right? And or like Sony, and she's like, "Yeah, you gotta try this." "Okay, great. Anything for you. Just please let me know, like, whenever you can send it to me." And that's how we got our first customer. This girl just picks up the phone. She hadn't even invested in our company at that point. She was just helping out, like, turn on like, she didn't even fully understand what we were doing. But it's crazy because every person so the first thing she saw is that every person that used our technology was either impressed by the concept of it or was impressed by the re like, they saw it, right? And we have very few people that we actually trialed it with early on. So at first it was just the research, but she was impressed, and then she took all this time to learn what we were doing, and so ultimately, that helped us scale the business insanely because she could explain it better than we could, like, in better terms and more specific industry terms, and anyway, get yourself someone who understands your field but is well connected, and get that person to have a shared interest in your company. Have them have a stake or something that makes them really want you to succeed. And that's such a secret superpower. There's people whose entire job has been, and there's very few of them, but there are people who've built networks around your favorite industries and who live off of that.
So Franco, we're marketing guys, so I have to ask, what's your marketing strategy looking like at the moment? How you planning to actually get the word out?
Yeah. So we hired a fractional chief marketing officer. She used to be a chief marketing officer for a big company in the regulated space here in the US. So like, no, that's not telling you much, but at the same time it's telling you everything you need to know. And basically, so right now, man, we're just focused on building the concept. Like we need to improve our core messaging and our identity, our core branding a lot more, like our website. Like so we're going back to basics, scrapping it all up and building it from scratch. We're actually gonna by this week. It's funny if you come in on like Wednesday or Thursday to our website, like it'll be a completely new website. And yeah, and so right now we're building the concept. Then we're trying to build the customer experience to be as simple as possible. Meaning, um, I want a customer or a patient to go into my website and be able to order something like within a minute or 2 minutes, right? Super quick, super easy, and then that shipment has to be coordinated perfectly. So once that is there, then we'll look into scaling. I mean, we have a few like relationships, news outlets, and things like that. I'm actually starting a podcast, which is funny. Yeah, for it's sponsored, so one of our customers actually sponsored it. So, like, we're having a whole in-person studio being done and everything, which is cool. So, um, and other than that, it's this podcast, it's like website, and word of mouth, and then traveling to conferences. Conferences are huge for us.